G'day, mate, and welcome to the Recast.
Hello. I'm MonstersReview.
Recast day is a very dangerous day. That's a cute beaver. Welcome to the new and improved Recast, episode number 51, where we are talking about finally after like
Too long.
3 years in the making, Static Cling, Rocko's Modern Life. It's out, and we're gonna talk about it, and we're gonna relay it back to an episode of the original show. We're also going to discuss some of the changes that are going on at the Recast.
Change. Ooh.
Listen to the wind cloud. Change is good. And in addition to that, as a part of that change, we are going to have a bit of a retrospective on the news about Invader Zim and Rocko's Modern Life Static Cling. Just kind of the history of those announcements and like what went on with Nickelodeon in the whole time. We've put together like a timeline, and we've been covering it on the Recast since at least episode 7, if not before then.
It's been an issue for the entire time the Recast has existed.
Right. And so we kind of wanted to, now that we have both specials are out, we want to do a little bit of a post-mortem on like what the history of that, the implications behind the scenes at Nickelodeon, and what this could possibly mean for future projects like the Rugrats one. So yeah, do we have any corrections on last week?
Not that I could find. It was really cool reading through the comments. A lot of people had some really touching things to say about how the Recast has affected them in the past year since it's existed, and we appreciate you sharing those things with us. And just to reiterate what happened last week, it was really cool to celebrate 50 episodes.
Yeah, absolutely. We have a Discord server. It is pretty active, to be honest.
Yeah.
And if you'd like to be a part of it, there is a link down in the description. Just come on in, join the party. We recently got boosted.
Ooh.
We got Kuro and Shadow, Discord Nitro, and they boosted our server, which means we have more emojis. So if you have any suggestions for emojis, let us know. I was thinking maybe I would take like the faces from like the thumbnails and maybe just make a bunch of emojis out of those. I don't know. Let us know. Shall we talk about the changes on the Recast?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So, we talked about it a little bit last week that there's going to be changes, but that nothing is going anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
Everything you love about the Recast is still going to be here, but there's going to be one key change. Not a key change like music.
Yeah.
Just an important change. The change is that, should I like leave them in suspense for a little while longer?
Yeah. Dun 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 dun.
We are going to have one segment before the episode discussion that's going to rotate. So what that means is that in every podcast from now on, you're going to be hearing what's going on right now, which is the intro. And then after the intro, we're going to go into the rotating segment, as we call it. And the rotating segment is going to be anything from news, where we talk about a bunch of news things that happened in the past maybe month or so, to questions, where we take a few questions from the Recast server, multiple questions, and just kind of rapid fire answer them, or maybe take longer time and answer them. Or it could be just like we pick a topic, like we're doing this week with the kind of retrospective on Static Cling and Enter the Florpus. And yeah, it basically, it's just kind of, we're doing this so that we can focus in on something instead of feeling like every week we need to find news articles, we need to find a question of the week, we need to talk about what we watched, and we need to have other discuss. Like we're streamlining it really. So, and we're leaving it up to our discretion, which means we're only going to talk about something if we feel like it really warrants our discussion or we have something to say.
Yeah.
Still keep sending us in, requests for us to talk about news articles. Keep sending us in questions, but we're gonna bank the questions. We're gonna, kind of just have a big list of them, and then every so often we'll go into that list and we'll do an episode where we answer questions.
Yeah, I think it'll be more effective that way.
It allows us to have more time to talk about one given subject, and it just makes things easier. Just like a little bit behind the scenes, there's a lot of times where we pick a lot of news articles and then we end up not having much to say about some of them, and then I end up having to cut them out, and that just kind of takes more time to edit, it's a little bit more of a pain. And it's like, I guess when you do it every week, you feel obligation to talk about like every piece of news that comes out, but we're not a news source. Don't look to us to hear every piece of news in the animation industry. Look to us for our opinion when we have an opinion on the news. And so probably maybe like once or twice a month there'll be a news segment, and we'll probably cover anything happening within the past month or so.
Sure.
So with that, let's get into the rotating segment.
Rotation.
What's the best way to do this? Should we read out the timeline and then give commentary, or should we give commentary?
Let's do it like procedural, like kind of just chronologically, and kind of talk about each thing along the way.
Sounds good to me. We can trace this line of thinking back to when the 90s Are All That came out in like 2011. Nickelodeon for a while there in the mid 2010s was kind of into this idea of nostalgia.
Yeah.
Let's sell nostalgia type stuff at Hot Topic and make bank. Let's have this kind of whole branding of classic Nick or 90s Nick or whatever you want to say. Fast forwarding to September 2nd, 2015, that's when someone from Nick actually stepped out and said they are looking into their catalog of older shows for a possible reboot or revival.
Yeah, they didn't list anybody in particular.
Right. Now, this is significant because up to this point, there was no reboots in terms of any of their animated series. The closest thing we got was Rugrats got a few spin-off shows. Obviously, Monsters, you're aware of another spin-off show on Nickelodeon. Rugrats, had a few eras where it was like on hiatus or whatever. Fairly Odd Parents got canceled and renewed, but none of that was like a reboot or a revival. Nothing was like off the air for years and then came back. Mm-hmm. At least in terms of the animated stuff, even in the form of TV movie, there was just like none of that. It was not a thing.
Right.
So this announcement, or this just kind of like floating idea out there of like, oh, there could be something like this. That was enough to get a lot of people thinking. And if you remember, this was also around the time when that whole like there's gonna be an Avengers Nicktoon movie out there, and it's like where it's like 5 different Nicktoons come into the real world and interact with each other, and people were all like talking about that, and there was buzz on that, and like that amounted to nothing.
Yeah, and this was also around the time when the 90s Are All That block rebranded to the Splat, which has been for most of the past few years kind of the consistent branding of Nickelodeon's 90s initiative.
Got a lot more time on air versus just the like 4-hour block where it was just 2 hours repeated at like 1 a.m.
Yeah.
Like 90s Are All That was a great idea, but it just didn't have the best structure, I guess.
No, yeah, and
the Splat was much better.
The Splat was very much like a big PR thing too, because they went on all fronts with social media and YouTube, and they were really pushing it.
And the fact that there were all these articles coming out about like a Nicktoons crossover movie, and people were talking about the Splat and the 90s Are All That and all that stuff, that clearly showed Nickelodeon that there's mindshare for these nostalgic Nick shows.
Yeah,
and I guess this was all like a byproduct of the fact that Nicktoons Network, or Nicktoons, or what is it called now?
It's still called Nicktoons.
That used to be for old Nicktoons, but then it just kind of slowly became like a second Nickelodeon. So there needed to be some sort of place for these old Nicktoons to go, and so we had this. Anyway, in November 23rd, 2015, it was officially announced that there is a Hey Arnold TV movie in development, and that it was the Jungle movie.
Yeah, which had been long awaited by fans of the show.
Yes. Craig Bartlett had released like details about the Jungle movie like all over the place, like little bits and pieces. The show technically ends on a cliffhanger of sorts. Like there was no doubt that this, if the show was going to come back, it was going to be that. It was going to be the Jungle movie. There's like a long sordid history on just that we could go into, where basically that was going to be like the Hero movie, like theatrical movie was the Jungle movie, but then I don't know what someone at Nick stepped in and decided they needed to be something a little more self-contained, I guess was the thinking. And then we had the Harold movie, which was met with mixed reception. Anyway, this was, I guess, a little different from Invader Zim and Rocko in the sense that it was a cliffhanger. It was something that was kind of asking for a resolution versus just like, let's do a reunion special kind of out of nowhere.
Right.
So even though this was really cool, this wasn't necessarily a sign that there was going to be like, other TV movies. It was just kind of like, cool.
It was an isolated incident at the time.
Until August 2016, only a few months later, when Nickelodeon announces that there is going to be a Rocko's Modern Life TV special.
Ooh, we were all hyped for that.
Yeah. I was really excited. It is kind of surprising they picked Rocko, to be honest. Like, not that Rocko isn't a show, like a lot of people like Rocko, but like you would think that they would have dipped into Rugrats maybe like sooner, or you would think that maybe they would want more of like a story-based show to have like I don't know, a reunion or something like that. But yeah, no, I'm happy that they picked Rocko.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, so there wasn't really any other news until November 8th, so a few months passed in 2016, where you know more about this than I do, Monsters. You tell it.
So, CH Greenblatt has a presence on Tumblr. I don't know how active that site still is, but back in 2016 it still was. And someone asked CH Greenblatt on his Tumblr, or just simply left him a comment saying, it'd be super cool if you made an Invader Zim movie with Jonan Vasquez, the original creator of Invader Zim. And CX Greenblatt replied to it saying, well, lucky for you, well, this is just paraphrasing. He said, lucky for you, Jonan actually is working on an Invader Zim movie. So this kind of made the internet go crazy, and everybody was tweeting a storm at Jonan saying, like, is this real? And he said no, assuming he was under some sort of binding contract or NDA.
Right. Well, he couldn't say like I'm not allowed to say, because then that just confirms it.
Yeah.
You know, Greenblatt is a good source of information. But yes, finally in April 4th of 2017, so we're talking a good like 5 months here, Nickelodeon does officially announce that there's going to be an Invader Zim TV special. So it's, you know, it seemed like on a roll. Like it wasn't like they announced all this at once, but you're looking at November of 2015, then to August of 2016 for Rocko, and then to April of 2017 to Invader Zim. It seemed like they were doing this like once a year, basically.
Yeah.
And mind you, when they announced Invader Zim, we still hadn't seen the Hey Arnold film either.
Mm-hmm.
So the next thing that happens is that San Diego Comic-Con 2017. And this was huge, right? This was Nickelodeon's thing at Comic-Con that year.
Right.
There was a huge blowout where they showed the long teaser of Static Cling. You know, that's like the minute and a half teaser where it's essentially the recreation of the theme song in the modern era. Great piece to use to market the thing.
Oh, yeah.
Because it tells us nothing about the story, but it just kind of has a bunch of rapid fire gags, a little bit of nostalgia with the song and all that. So they air that, they show that, and you know, you're thinking like, well, okay, they have this big piece finished here, so the thing's got to be like at least partly done, right?
Yeah.
Like, and then additionally, they show some art for the Jungle movie, and they talk a little bit more about it. I think they did do like a little Jungle movie trailer after.
Yeah, like some sort of featurette thing.
Right. I made a video back when this happened, and yeah, it was an exciting time. It was also revealed that Static Cling was coming in 2018. Cool. Great. Wonderful. And then on November 24th, 2017, the Jungle movie airs on Nickelodeon, and I'll save, you know, I did do a video then, and have you seen it, Monsters?
I have, yeah, but it's been a while.
Okay, yeah, same. For reasons that you'll understand later, we'll keep our personal opinions on it aside, but what we do know is that it got 1.63 million viewers.
Total, yeah, so that's including the Nickelodeon main channel, T-Nick, the secondary sister channel, and Nicktoons, which is another secondary sister channel.
I mean, 1.63 million, like it for like a regular thing that's airing, like that's decent on Nickelodeon terms, but when you remember that represents 3 networks. So if you divide that by 3, like what are you looking at there? You're looking at
a little bit more than 0.5.
So you're looking at about 0.5 million per channel. And this isn't like a new episode. This is like a heavily promoted reunion movie. I just remember at the time, like, you know, I would talk to people and I'd be like, hey, you remember Hey Arnold? And they'd be like, oh, I love Hey Arnold. And I'd be like, oh, did you know there's a TV movie coming out? And they'd either be like, no, or they'd be like, yeah, I heard something about that. And I'd be like, oh, it's going to air on Nick. And then they'd be like, oh, okay. Because a lot of the people that would have nostalgia for it are like in college or just out of college and don't have television. Like they have streaming services.
Yeah.
And if from what I recall, I think they might have put it on nick.com with like a cable login a few days later or something. But
there was a DVD release too.
You would know that. But they did not put it on like Hulu or Netflix or I don't even know if Verve was a thing. Well, I guess it was in 2017. But you know what I mean? Like they didn't do that. They just said, well, we're gonna air it in a primetime slot, and ooh, that's great, isn't it? But it wasn't. Like that's really kind of sad, especially when you consider I know there are more people out there that would be interested in this, but only if they could see it conveniently.
Yeah, for comparison's sake, I know SpongeBob is SpongeBob, but the recent birthday blowout also had a simulcast between Nickelodeon, Nicktoons, and Teen Nick, and that scored 2.2 million.
But that's also years later now. I mean, 2017 like it's just been a graph that's gotten worse and worse over time.
Yeah.
So to get 2.2 million is still not like crazy impressive, but it's not just that it's a higher number than 1.63. It makes the Jungle movie look even more pathetic with inflation. And it just seems like a big missed potential, really. It seems like I get why they'd want to air it on Nickelodeon, but it did kind of seem at the time like it was obvious that this should have maybe also been on a streaming service. Via a post that Joe Murray posted much, much later, we can pinpoint that Static Cling was finished around late 2017, late fall-ish. Just as a quick reminder before we get there, the special aired in August of 2019.
Yeah, just like a week ago.
Yeah, so almost 2 years. Almost 2 years between it being finished and it finally releasing. So, I don't know if you guys heard about this, but like on June 4th, 2018, Saima Zargami, the president of Nickelodeon, retires from the company. She steps down, which is, in my opinion, code for something happened and it's a graceful exit versus saying you got fired.
Yeah.
There's like a long laundry list of things that Saima has allegedly done. She didn't seem like a very good president. She's the reason why Planet Sheen exists, probably. But we don't really know what the deal is with like the incident that caused her to step down. All we know is that like a bunch of other people at Viacom were stepping down. The
president and CEO of BET also left around that time. They were just reorganizing all of their executive and management staff.
Right. So it might have just been that Nick was not performing in the way that Viacom wanted it to, and that could be the reason. But we do know that this initiative for these like TV movies was a Saima baby, basically. Like that was because this isn't just like some isolated incident. It's not like some exec was like, oh, let's do like reunion specials. This was a clear push to have a consistent, like year after year, we're going to announce this. Even looking into, so 2017 is when Invader Zim was announced. Well, 2018 was when Rugrats was announced too. So it did kind of seem like there might have been this momentum of doing this.
There was clearly a strategy.
Right. It was some pillar of strategy that the higher-ups at Nick were going with. In San Diego Comic-Con 2018, Rocko's Modern Life Static Cling was notably absent. Again, according to Joe Murray, it was finished in 2017. They could show anything they want at Comic-Con 2018, but Rocko, like they didn't even have anyone there for Rocko. There was an Invader Zim panel with like a really not great teaser.
Yeah, the teaser, it wasn't like Rocko because there was no, like it wasn't a snippet from the special itself. It was just like 1 minute of Invader Zim background music set to different clips with no voices. So it was just music with clips of the animation, and that was it.
One thought that I had when we were going through this is that if Zim is there, right? Zim is at San Diego Comic-Con, and mind you, this is still before Brian Robbins stepped up. There was an interim president that presumably is just, going to maintain course. When you're an interim, you're not going to be like changing the strategy of marketing or whatever. But the interesting thing is that if Rocko's not there and it was finished in late 2017, and remember, we had that slated release for 2018, I think that the original plan was to have Rocko premiere somewhere in that first half of 2018, and there'd be no reason to have Rocko at Comic-Con because the special would have already aired. That's my theory. I could definitely be wrong on that, but it does kind of seem to line up when you look at it like that, and especially if you look at it like they were announcing these year after year, and Hey Arnold had come out like, maybe like 6 months before, like maybe it would have been Hey Arnold, and then 6 months later Rocko, and then 6 months later Zim, or 8 months later Zim. That seems to make sense to me. That's one possible reason why Rocko wasn't there, but we can't know, unfortunately.
Yeah.
So on September 24th, 2018, Joe Murray did make a blog post on his website about the special, and this is how we know that the special was finished in February of 2017, because he says, since we finished the Rocko special, Static Cling, a year ago, there has been much speculation as to the whereabouts of this special, and if it will ever see the light of day. Some rumors have it with a streaming channel. Well, I'm sworn to secrecy, but there are many conversations being had about the future of Rocko, and who knows if anything will bear fruit. But I do know that the Rocko special will be coming out fairly soon. This is in September 24th, 2018.
Yeah.
I will keep this blog posted of any news. Remember, this is entertainment. Many things happen. Most do not.
Ooh.
If you recall, this is when we step into the picture. In the 7th recast, we talk about how there was this tweet by someone working at Nickelodeon that allegedly confirmed that it was coming to Netflix. Like the Rocko special was coming to Netflix. And they were in talks with Netflix. Now the tweet was deleted when we talked about it back then. So I don't remember the exact wording or exactly, but some semi-official source that now deleted did float the idea of Netflix. And so we were all abuzz with speculation of Netflix. Is it going to be Netflix? Is it going to be Hulu? Is it going to come to a streaming service? That makes sense when you consider how badly Hey Arnold performed. And also when you consider that Nickelodeon had put Pinky Malinky, a show that was slated for Nickelodeon, onto Netflix. Nickelodeon has this weird partnership with Netflix. They also have this partnership with Verve and Hulu and just like every other streaming service because they're
Amazon.
weird and dumb. Yeah, there's a Nick channel on Amazon. Oh, God, it's so dumb. But yeah, no, that made sense, right? Like everyone was thinking it because there was a number of things that made sense. And it also made sense, okay, well, why haven't we heard details about when Rocko's coming out and when Zim is coming out and all this? Well, because they're in negotiations with Netflix and maybe that just takes months and months. Who knows? But basically, we were promised 2018. And so that's why Joe Murray seems confident that it's coming out soon, because he, like everyone else, was told 2018. And now it's like late September 2018. And we don't have a release date. I do remember about us talking about this like a few times in the cast, like, well, it's almost over. 2018, they're going to drop it or... And of course, I mean, this sort of thing happens, but typically you announce if it's delayed. Like, that's typically the polite thing to do to your audience. If you've said 2018, then you say, like, first quarter 2019. Do you think it was just like they were dealing with Netflix for months and months of negotiation?
Well, let us not forget that Pinky Malinky also had its own share of delays, because it was announced, I think, in June of 2018 that it was headed to Netflix, and it didn't premiere until January 1st of this year, 2019. So who knows? Maybe it was negotiations. Maybe it was just poor planning. They haven't really gone too in depth as to why such delays happened. I mean, I guess as an example, over at Cartoon Network and Adult Swim, when the Samurai Jack 5th season was announced, that was announced, I think, in late 2015, and they said that it was going to premiere in 2016. Ultimately, though, it didn't premiere until, I think, spring of 2017. So, but I do think that they provided some progress and some updates, but it wasn't until much later as well. Maybe they were hoping to, but I do know that they did spend fairly late into that period still working on it, whereas this Rocko special was completely done.
Right.
So, who knows?
Yeah. And so there's a few pieces of information that make, like... So... Nickelodeon has in the past been known to really screw over airings of things by like airing them at 6 a.m. or whatever. It wouldn't be entirely unheard of for Nickelodeon to just shelve this special and never air it. Like, it would be weird. It wouldn't make sense from a business perspective because you already have it made. And also, we now know that there is an element of... There's a transgender character in Static Cling. And Nickelodeon maybe is not the most progressive company out there. So it does kind of make you think a little bit. I'm not saying that Nickelodeon held off on airing it because of that. I don't know. But I do know that if I was Joe Murray and they were holding back on the special for questionable reasons, that would be something that would pop into my mind. Like, are they going to censor this?
Yeah.
Like, are they hesitant about this, or are they just genuinely trying to find the best home for it? Again, I'm not saying it's just another plausible reason why maybe they were just unsure about what to do with this special, because it contains an element that Nickelodeon isn't quite comfortable with yet, I guess. They've shown signs of more progressive stuff, I know, on the Loud House, etc. But like, there still is that weirdness about, none of the kids networks know how to handle that entirely yet. We're still navigating it. But on October 1st, Brian Robbins is in.
Yep.
There was, of course, a lot of interviews with him and stuff like that, but we didn't really know what the plan was, what his vision for Nickelodeon was entirely going to be, until February of 2019, when, again, there's a recast where we talk about all of this, and we're still facing the ramifications of that recast where we have to watch all of these stupid projects as they come out. We know that Brian Robbins' plan does have to do with rebooting and refreshing old ideas and franchises, but his thoughts seem to live more in the live action realm and in ideas that kind of maybe don't always come from Nick itself, like Are You Smarter Than a Fifth Grader, or taking things from YouTube like Ryan's Toy Review. And nowhere in his, here's all the projects we have coming up, does it say anything about Rocko, Invader Zim, or even Rugrats. Which, by the way, I mean, we didn't mention it, but that was announced in the summer of 2018, that there was going to be a live-action Rugrats movie and a TV show.
Mm-hmm.
And, of course, that's a little different because that is a TV show and a real movie versus all these TV movies that we've been getting. That's scary that there's not even an announcement that we have these exciting projects. And this can happen when the guard changes at these big companies, where they see what the old guard was doing and they just don't want any part of it. They're like, well, that's not a part of my plan. And that's where I'm thinking, like, okay, this legitimately could get swept under the rug. This legitimately could get shelved, because if Brian Robbins just doesn't care about it, it won't happen.
Yeah, I mean, another parallel to Cartoon Network, that exact same thing happened in the late 2000s when Jim Samples resigned and Stuart Snyder came on board, and their whole executive team kind of switched over. There was a lot of projects that got swept under the rug, and they had an entirely different vision for the network than what was from the team before it.
So during that February, both Jonan Vasquez and Joe Murray had some things to say. And mind you, I mean, at this point, the Invader Zim movie isn't necessarily finished, but with how things were going with like the announcements of Rocko, it definitely was kind of like, oh no, like, is Zim gonna face this too? Like, is Zim in trouble too?
Yeah.
So here's what Joe Murray had to say. And he said this on Facebook on February 13th. Just let me clarify a few things. I am not having a falling out with Nickelodeon. I had a very good experience with them doing the Rocko special. They were awesome, especially Chris Viscardi. But just like we didn't have the same set of executives on the special that I did on the original Rocko, we now have a completely different leadership than I did on the special. All the way to the very top, Sima approved our story and gave her blessings on the project. She is now gone. So I don't know the new people in charge, except for Ramsey, who's great. But the rest I don't know. I don't want to have a falling out with Nickelodeon, but some of that hinges on what happens with the Rocko special Static Cling. Thank you for everyone's support. We will see what happens. And then he also said, the Rocko special has an edge to it, but it has a great message. I can't imagine Nickelodeon would shy away from it at this point, but you never know. They may think it's more streaming material, but we totally stayed true to the spirit of what the show was in the 90s. Just not sure the Nick of the 90s is the Nick of now. I'm keeping my hopes up that Nickelodeon will step up. And not to be upstage, Jonan also had some comments, but his were a little snarkier. And he said this on February 3rd, a little bit before Joe Murray. But thinking about how long that Rocko movie has been done without being seen makes me wonder how long it will take for the Zim special to show up. It's been half a year since there was any official mention of it. What if Nick is run by that weird man from Shirkers? I don't understand his reference, but I assume it's like a scathing
corporate executive or something. I don't know.
Yeah, I don't know. But yeah, so both the creators are apprehensive, and yeah, I mean, you would be too if a person greenlit your show and gave you blessing and all that, and then a new person came in. That doesn't mean that the old agreement's still there.
Mm-hmm.
It is also interesting that the way Joe Murray says it, like, you know, I've heard that it might come out on streaming. As of February 13th, it doesn't sound like he was told this was coming out on streaming services.
Nah, he heard rumblings for a long time, but I don't think he got any sort of official confirmation until sometime in late spring of this year.
Right. Because if it was something where they told him, but he couldn't mention it, I don't think he would say they may think it's more streaming material. Like, I don't think he'd say that if he wasn't allowed to say that. You know what I mean? If he knew it, I feel like he'd say, like, it might not come out in a traditional way, but it's going to come out soon. Or, he'd say something else.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, we know that Nickelodeon loves to keep its creators in the dark on certain things. So that's where we were. We were in February of the new year. The promised release year came and went. There's been no mention of Rocko for months, and there was new leadership at Nickelodeon. So then finally, on May 14th, 2019, Nickelodeon announces the release of Zim and Rocko on Netflix this summer. And finally, here we are, and they are both out as of August
17th.
So that's a long timeline. I mean, there's more events that happen, but we just kind of wanted to hit the keynotes here. I did have one thought. What if Netflix wanted both Rocko and Zim to air at the same time because they felt like that would make more sense for them, with their whole binge strategy?
Yeah.
It does make sense in a way, right? Like, because now if someone watches Rocko, you immediately get recommended Zim. If someone watches Zim, you immediately get recommended Rocko. Mind you, Rocko's Modern Life and Zim, like the shows, neither of those are on Netflix. Zim is on Hulu and Rocko is on DVD.
Right, they're complementary products. It's like you use one to hype up the other and vice versa.
Right. So that does make sense, but I don't know. I feel like I don't know what happened. Maybe Nickelodeon was in the process of negotiating with Netflix somewhere in 2018, and then the guard shifted, and like all that was put on halt until Brian Robbins kind of got his bearings, and then they resumed negotiation. Is that possible?
I think so.
I'm still sticking with my theory that Rocko was supposed to have aired in the first two quarters in the first half of 2018. That's my theory, that was the initial plan. When they said 2018, they meant it. They meant, about a year from Comic-Con 2017. I think that would make sense.
Yeah, I mean, that's a possibility, but I mean, I feel like maybe just another thing is that because they hadn't sorted anything out, they just wanted to completely ignore it and pretend like it doesn't exist until they did figure something out.
Right. Well, I'm just saying, I think that's what the initial plan is.
Right.
But certainly, the shakeup at Nickelodeon greatly affected this. And I think one of the things this tells us is that there's not going to be any more of this. Like I think the Rugrats reboot makes sense in Brian Robbins' world because that's like a full reboot show. And Rugrats was like super, super marketable at the time and hopefully could be again. And from what we've seen, he tends to go for like the lower hanging fruit of things that were popular on Nickelodeon or just in general. He doesn't seem very interested in like taking Rocko, which is something that, it was popular in its day, but it wasn't like this huge phenomena. I don't know. That just doesn't strike me as it. And it's been this long. It's been another year gone, and no more announcements of that. Instead, we've had things like All That and Camp Coral.
All three of these specials were creative risks, and I'm not sure if the ratings of the Jungle movie translated into success or not. It doesn't look like it, and who knows how these Netflix specials will perform because Netflix doesn't publicly disclose their analytics. Right. But from the looks of it, it doesn't look like the Nickelodeon, because if there was just so much more publicity behind it, other than just people saying like, oh, remember that show from your childhood? Well, there's more material now. If there was more of like a mainstream acknowledgement of it, I feel like maybe that would lead to more things. But
I mean, there was a lot of articles, like a lot of mainstream news articles were like, hey, remember Rugrats? Remember Rocko? Remember this? Remember?
Yeah. Well,
that's not like a TV commercial on like a network, like that's not a huge billboard or something.
Well,
but
let's not forget too that I perhaps, and maybe this is just me speculating. It definitely is me speculating, but maybe because of how long the wait was, it turned off some people and completely like made them turn away from it and forget about it.
Right. Well, I think that's what happened with the Jungle movie in the sense that like, there was a lot of buzz when it first got announced and at Comic-Con, but like, I don't really recall that much buzz like right leading up to it. And again, when it airs on Nickelodeon, instead of being on the front page of Netflix or whatever, it came and went. Like, that was one of the weird things about it is that, you're right, it had a DVD, but if you didn't have that DVD, it's just kind of like, it was like a one-night event, and then it was over. I think they rebroadcast it maybe the next day, but it was not like a
Do you think if the marketing, like the initial announcement to the release date, if that was closer together, or if they kind of did like a surprise drop, do you think that would be more effective?
I honestly do think it was just doomed by being on Nickelodeon.
That's fair.
I really do. I really feel like it needed streaming or I don't know, simulcast on CBS, which I guess they didn't own at the time. But if they could have theoretically done it on something like that, maybe. But when you're dealing with these I don't want to say nostalgia pandering because that's like, but it kind of these nostalgia baiting specials. You want to hit the key demographic, which is us, which is streaming. It's all streaming.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm glad. I am super glad that Static Cling and Enter the Florpus were Netflix originals. I just wish that Static Cling had. I just wish. I guess there was a little more
clarity,
transparency. Yeah. At least with Joe Murray. At least between Nickelodeon and Joe Murray. Because that just doesn't seem to be right.
They never treat their creators traditionally not very well.
Yeah, I don't think the new guard will, I don't think that changes. But I guess one of the interesting things you pointed out about how, the Jungle movie wasn't a success. Now, when it comes to things like this, it is interesting to measure what success is. Because yes, by broadcast standards, not a success at all. Mm-hmm. But they have a line of products like Hot Topic, but also like Think Geek has a bunch of Nickelodeon stuff or some Nickelodeon stuff, and
there was the DVD release.
When you think about it, like maybe it's also advertising for Rugrats, or any of these other projects where it's like it gets people thinking about their nostalgia. There is a greater value than just like, well, they made 1.63 million viewers and that's their profits. That's their ad profits or whatever. What do you think all this means for Rugrats? Do you think it means anything?
To be quite frank, no, because I think these were all lessons learned, and I'm certain that the current Nickelodeon executive team is taking notes. And like you mentioned, like Rocko and Zim, like they've had, I guess, their share of like cult followings, and they're popular to some extent. But Rugrats is Rugrats. Like Rugrats is huge, and I think it will perform really well regardless of the circumstances that surround it.
I honestly could see this maybe getting the movie pulled. That's my thinking. I mean, the thing is that they're so early in, like we've seen literally nothing. Any screenshot you think you've seen has been a fan mock-up at this point. Yeah. There is no visuals. The only thing we got is an announcement of like a few people attached to the project. That is it. So they could easily just quietly drop both the movie and the show. Like, just say, well, we don't want to do this anymore, if Brian Robbins isn't interested in it. But I do feel like of all the older shows, Brian Robbins would be. If he was interested in all that, I think it would make sense for him to be interested in Rugrats.
Well, he also helped, like, I don't know if he created or helped. He had a pretty big creative influence on the original All That.
Also of note is that he was... what, the founder or creator?
He was a co-creator of Awesomeness TV.
Yes, which is the YouTube network thing that had a show on Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
But basically, like, the guy knows the internet. You know what I mean? Like, it doesn't surprise me that someone like him would step in and say, no, we're not going to air this on Nickelodeon. Like, no one's, the kind of people that want to see Rocko's Modern Life TV special and Enter the Florpus are going to be people who have streaming services. And also, I feel like just like another nice benefit is that like you kind of do sidestep a lot of like the questionable things, like Invader Zim. I was watching some of it today. I'm watching it in preparation to watch the TV movie, which I haven't seen yet. But like there is kind of questionable content in it for kids, like harvesting organs. I saw an episode where Zim rips a kid's eyes out and replaces them with some sort of weird, like, cybernetic eyes that makes them
very
think the squirrel
edgy.
Is Zim.
Both visually and in tone.
Right. And I don't mean that as, like, a moral guardian, but I do mean that in the sense that some people will be offended if their kids saw that on Nickelodeon. And so by putting it on Netflix, you kind of, like, sidestep all that, right? It's just kind of like... well, it's here on Netflix. You can allow your kids, if you allow your kids to watch things freely on Netflix, they're going to see much worse than that. And if you don't, well, then you'll have that power over them. They won't just catch it on Nickelodeon.
Yeah, and I guess same goes for some of the innuendo in Rocko too.
Right. All right. So I think we did thoroughly discussed this and did a cool retrospective on it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. Let us know what you guys think.
Let us know if you want more things like this. One of the great things about having the rotating segment is that we can just take 45 minutes or an hour and just go in depth about one thing instead of feeling like we need to keep rushing to the next story.
Yeah.
All right, we are going to go on our break now. If you're wondering where the next episode announcement is, we're actually going to be doing that at the very end of the podcast, or before trivia, but towards the end of the podcast. It just kind of makes sense to do that after we've talked about what we're going to talk about, instead of kind of jumping the gun and making you all excited for something that you're not going to see, and less excited for the thing we're just about to talk about. So anyway, when we come back, we're going to be talking about Rocko's Modern Life, I Have No Son, and Static Cling. And we are back. So we are going to start by talking about the 1994 classic, I Have No Son, which is the first episode of season 2 of Rocko's Modern Life and the first two-parter in the series overall.
Mm-hmm.
I often get this episode confused with Wacky Deli, which is the other episode to focus on the Fatheads, and Wacky Deli is probably the most iconic episode of Rocko, maybe?
I don't know. Oh wait, is that the one with the recycle song?
No. That's another good one.
Okay.
But anyway, so I Have No Son. It's about Rocko and Filbert's favorite TV show, The Fatheads. They find out that it was created by the child of Ed and Bev Bighead, their neighbors. And so they go and they see if they can get an in with this creator, but they find out that there was an estrangement between said creator and Ed. And Bev wants them to reconcile so that the child can be at their 30th anniversary. So she sends Filbert and Rocko with, $3?
Yeah.
to
Hollywood.
To go and find the creator and bring them back and help reconcile. But they find out that the creator there's some hang up, but eventually there is a reconciliation.
Yes.
So this episode is kind of structured in... It literally has a part 2 title card. So the first half is basically all the Hollywood stuff, and then the second part is taking place at this reunion.
Yes.
If you were a casual watcher of Rocko, you might be surprised that this episode is so meaningful. Quite frankly,
mm-hmm.
It's a parent-child estrangement for very, very real reasons. Sure, it's cartoony, but it's Ed wanted his child to follow in his footsteps.
That's a real issue.
Right, to be a respectable businessman at the company where everyone is, everyone in town is a conglomerator or whatever. And his child had a different path. And it's especially, I was reading about how Joe Murray and other people who worked on it, it's an issue that kind of hit home because animator is not it's a title that we look up to quite a bit, but it's not necessarily the most respected title, and it's an art thing. Not everyone gets art things.
Yeah.
This was relatable directly to people making it.
Yeah, animation has always been something that's fairly stigmatized and looked at as something that's for kids, and because you're making something that oftentimes is targeted towards kids, people look at it as a lesser art form.
Right, and despite what is shown at the end of the episode, I don't think there is quite a huge paycheck for most animators.
Yeah.
I mean, show creators that have a really popular show, maybe, but a lot of the people that work in animation, you kind of think that they're rich because they're a part of the Hollywood or whatever, but not exactly.
No.
Especially when factoring in cost of living out there.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a surprisingly real and meaningful episode, and I've watched the show forward and back a few times, but not in a while, and so I was kind of a little bit surprised at how sweet it was. Yeah, to be honest.
I find it funny that it's not the the show itself and the comparisons to the Bigheads that makes Rocko realize the connection to the Fatheads. It's the thing that says created by the creator.
Well, and that's funny too, is that this is allegedly their favorite show, even though we've never seen it before. And there's a big title card that says the name of the creator right after the title, and apparently they only just now noticed, oh yeah, that's a last name that's our neighbors.
Yeah.
Do you understand why that person is holding a smiley face in Hollywood? I feel like there's a reference or something that I just completely
maybe it's just
never
like
understood.
it's trying to point out kind of the fake nature of everybody out there and how, you know, like
Okay.
people put on a certain face to try to cover up other things.
That's fair. That's fair. I guess in today's times, I'm so used to everything being like a reference, and it might be a reference, but it might just be the show being weird because the show is like that sometimes.
Yeah, I couldn't tell if the original opening bit of the Fatheads was like a reference to another brick in the wall or not, because it was very like abstract. It almost kind of reminded me of that Pink Floyd movie.
It kind of, it's a little reminiscent of You Can't Do That on Television's intro with like the factory. It also kind of seemed a little Monty Python-esque.
Yeah, I love the Fatheads, just like how it's an animator's meta take on animation and other shows. But my absolute favorite aspect of it is the dude that's just hysterically laughing in the background.
Yep. This cartoon has a laugh track for some reason.
There's just like there's people beating up each other in the background. You just hear like like in the background.
I like that the announcer is just like a waiter. Like that's the thing about the Fatheads is that it's so surreal, so beyond surreal, like every aspect of it, that it's just like it's great. And like what I love is that like the characters of the show are cracking up at what is like most people I feel like would have Heifer's reaction of like I don't get it.
Yeah.
But you know, everyone unilaterally aside from Heifer is like cracking up at the Fatheads.
It's some good commentary.
Did you realize Heifer was not in this episode until the end?
No, I didn't.
Were you like, oh yeah, he's on the show? Because it's weird, because I can't even think of another time when it's like just a Rocko Filbert story. Like generally, if they're gonna do the three of them, it's gonna do the three of them, and if there's gonna be two, it's usually just Rocko and Heifer.
And there's not really any explanation for why it's Filbert either. It's just that he happens to be there.
Right. I mean, him kind of like geeking out over Hollywood was good.
Yeah.
But I feel like they could have had those jokes with Heifer. Maybe it was just a matter of maybe the episode ran long, like the original idea of it, and so, you know, a way to shorten it is just cut one character, basically.
Yeah.
And I mean, really, Filbert didn't need to be in it. Like, he didn't really do much of anything. But what about, there was a moment where Rocko, Filbert, and the tour guide walk in on the animation studio that makes Rocko Modern Life storyboarding Rocko.
Oops, wrong show.
That's just like a classic gag.
Yeah.
It's always interesting seeing how animators like how these people look at themselves. Like they're kind of like schlubby looking guys in the room, like
pointing at storyboards. Yeah.
It's not like a super flattering portrayal. It's not like a scathing one either, but I don't know. It's just interesting.
The chameleons in the camera room. That was funny. Just throwing papers everywhere.
Yep. As I mentioned, like one of my favorite jokes is that like, so Bev sends Rocko out on this mission, and then she's just like, here's $3. And it's like, well, what is $3 gonna do for him? Like,
as someone who's visited that area before, it's a lot more than $3.
yeah. And I guess Rocko is in like Michigan or something, judging by that map.
Yeah, I don't know.
Like they look like they're around the Great Lakes area. I don't know. I don't think there was ever any confirmation of where Rocko is set. I mean, aside from O-Town.
Yeah, I think one of my favorite gags in the episode was when the creator was going back into their office, and they were followed by a bunch of just mindless people saying, yes, because they're yes men.
Oh, the yes men. So the creator of the Fatheads is voiced by Joe Murray, if you didn't know. Who like, and you wouldn't necessarily know it because Joe's got a pretty good voice for it, to be honest.
Well, voiced literally and figuratively.
What?
Well, because like, yeah, Joe Murray voices the character, but also it is like the voice of the creative team of this show in terms of the writing.
Okay.
If that makes any sense.
You got a little too meta for me for a second. But anyway, yeah, like Joe's got a pretty good voice for it. A very like good kind of monotone, like, and apparently the whole never. That's a joke, an in joke, because apparently that was Joe Murray's response when they wanted him to voice the character.
And that went on for quite a while too. It was pretty aggressive because usually the character is pretty, like, I don't want to say monotone, but pretty low key.
Another joke I liked from part 2 was the whole like the old frog dancing with Rocko. Like, that's just the kind of like physical craziness that, you know, Rocko was so good
dancing
at.
Or tongue grabbing.
Well, don't imply something that's not happening. The character just wrapped Rocko up in his tongue and is flinging him around the dance floor. That's all that's happening. And of course, it's always nice to have symbols for like character arcs. And so to have this donut, which is like such a great like symbol of corporate life, I guess, that like donuts are the highlight of your day, right? When you're like a boring business person, and I mean, no offense, I'm a boring business person sometimes too, but like that, the highlight, the symbol is the donut, and the fact that that's like, it breaks apart and everything, that's a good symbol.
Yeah.
Comparison wise, just like a minor thing, there are characters jumping out of the Conglommo building in both, although in this one, no one has parachutes.
Nope.
In Static Cling, they do have parachutes, which is like, oh man. Listen, it's not Rocko's Better Than Life unless people are just kind of randomly dying in the background.
Yeah.
It does happen in Static Cling too. There's a character that gets electrocuted to death.
Yeah.
Now, I remember that used to freak me out as a kid, because especially in like season 1 of the show, there would be times when like a character's head would get blown off or something. I mean, it was cartoony, but like, I don't know, in a very strange, morbid way. Of note, also, this episode was directed by Steven Hillenburg. If you don't know, Steven Hillenburg worked on Rocko before he worked on SpongeBob, and
he was a pretty important part of it.
Yeah, there's a lot of Rocko DNA in SpongeBob. As someone who's not as familiar with Rocko, like, what did you feel about I Have No Son?
Great episode. I think the fact that it is a two-parter serves it really well, because it is like a journey, and I think it serves it really well in the end. Obviously, the Bigheads they're not the main focus of the show, really, but they do play an important part. So to see a little bit more of an emotional backside to their story was interesting.
Of all characters, the Bigheads do kind of end up being the ones that get more like emotional development and more like this backstory. Like, we don't know. We've never met Rocko's parents in the show.
Yeah. But Rocko and Filbert and Heifer, even though they might be like cynical or stubborn sometimes, for the most part, they're just generally pretty neutral. Sometimes they can be chaotic, but like, it's always the Bigheads that are stirring up conflict.
Right. But that's what I'm saying, is just that, like, yeah, I mean, they're the grumpy neighbor. They're Squidward.
Yeah.
but no, like, it was seriously nice to see them get this conflict with their child that gives them more depth than just their bitter neighbors, like you might be bitter too if you haven't spoken to your child in however many years. Like,
right.
I don't know, it adds this nice new layer to them, and it carries on in, obviously it's important because it's what they built the reunion special around.
Exactly.
Before we move on, just one more thing. I also have to point out I like the joke where Rocko's head gets slammed in the door, and like in the Bighead's door, and then it remains there for like the rest of the scene until he like takes it out, and then Bev puts her head through it to talk to him. Like, I don't know. There's such silliness to the show that, like, I do genuinely miss this kind of cartoon. And it's kind of weird to say it because like SpongeBob is ever present, and SpongeBob is this type of cartoon, but
yeah, just exaggerated faces and lots of sound stings and
I think maybe that's why I may have taken such a liking to Gumball, and maybe why I likened it to like an older style cartoon.
It's over the top.
Right. Cartoony violence all the time. Like, don't ever take anything too seriously and that sort of thing.
Yeah.
Like Ed and Eddie was the same kind of show.
And I guess with that said, we can also talk about the new episode of the Fatheads at the end of the episode with Rollo.
Yeah. What is up with that? Like,
he's got the teeth sticking out. And he says mate at the end of every sentence.
Poor Rocko like reunites this person back with their parents, and this is the thanks he gets. Like, yeah, and it's about as bad as my impression at the start of the show. Good day, mate. Okay, so I guess before describing Static Cling, I guess I should talk about the context, like the setup of it.
Sure.
Because if you don't remember. So, like, this thing starts out... Well, okay. Static Cling starts out with, of all things, Monsters, what did I say last week nothing has anymore?
Context?
Of all things, Static Cling starts out with scrolling text in space.
Right. Yeah.
Remember how last week
Star
I was
Wars?
like, Avatar is the only thing to ever use it? Now, granted, it's a parody in Static Cling. Like, it literally gets smashed, like, in the middle of it.
Yeah.
But if you actually read the text, it does actually serve a purpose at the end. So the part that doesn't get read out loud is that apparently Filbert's kids got dropped off at a certain point in the journey. So there's an episode at the very end of the series called Future Schlock. And the premise of the episode is that we're in the future.
17 years to be exact.
Yeah, it's all Jetsons-y. Like, all the buildings are up on these like rafters and there's flying cars. Right, everything's chrome in the future, as we know. And basically they find a banana. I guess I should point out that this episode is just nuts. But the context is essentially, at the end, Rocko and Heifer got... How do I even describe this? This is so hard to describe, this episode.
I just talk about the ending, I guess.
Okay.
Because the ending is the only part that matters, with context to Static Cling.
Okay, sure. Basically, Rocko and Heifer get launched into space through shenanigans.
Yeah.
And they get returned at the end of the episode. But then the rocket ship flies into Rocko's house and launches Rocko, Heifer, and Filbert just out into space. And also, Filbert's kids are driving the rocket.
Yeah, they're inside the rocket.
Right, not inside the house. And so, for some reason, Static Cling decided to cling on to this fact without giving us that context. You know, just in case you don't remember an episode of a show from 20 years ago that doesn't have a digital release right now. I mean, it's not really important, but it is just kind of, I don't know, they latched on to that.
The thing that doesn't make sense to me is, like, the continuity is a little bit weird, because it takes place 17 years after the 90s, which is when the show takes place.
I'm glad you mentioned that, because Hefis from the Discord server had the same concern. As much as I liked Static Cling, I can't help thinking about the continuity issues. Like, it's supposed to be set 20 years after the episode Future Schlock, but that episode was set 17 years into the future already. Just funny to think about. Also, it was Filbert's kids who were piloting the rocket that sent them into space to begin with, yet they were absent in the special till the very end. Where did they go? I don't know, maybe I'm thinking about it too much, lol. As I mentioned, if you do read the end of the text crawl, it does mention that they were dropped off. Not that that's, like, much of an explanation.
Well, remember Ed Bighead in Future Schlock 2?
I'm okay pretending Future Schlock didn't exist, because it's just not a very good episode. It's cool seeing Filbert's kids grown up, but that's about it. Future Schlock, we could have done a recast comparing Future Schlock to Static Cling, but as you've heard, I'm having a hard time talking about it because it's such a weird, obtuse episode. There's, like, talking bananas in it. Like, I don't even know.
Yeah, but I guess there is some continuity issues, but for me at least, they're so minuscule that they don't even matter.
Yeah, it's more weird that they latched on to that particular thing instead of... Really, it would have been nice to maybe start it off with a scene of Rocko, of them getting launched into space. Maybe retcon it so that they got launched into space for other reasons, or I don't know. But just, like, you know, and have it so that, like, Ed gets returned by the aliens young for some reason. I mean, also, O-Town is, like, all futuristic and crazy, but not real futuristic, like...
Not Chrome, yeah.
Anyway, we can move on. So the premise of Static Cling is that the three of them have been out in space for 20 years and they're just getting back and they're discovering what a modern life is like in the 2010s. Filbert and Heifer take to it and they do great with all the technology and all the stuff, but naturally it overwhelms Rocko. Rocko is looking for some piece of nostalgia to latch onto and he decides that the Fatheads need a reboot. The creator has gone off on a journey to discover themselves. And so it's about Rocko trying to find them and trying to get the show rebooted.
Yeah.
Okay, so there's like a lot here. There's just like a lot. I guess the first thing to point out is just this is so much a love letter to the show. In the beginning, the space debris, all of its references.
Mm-hmm.
There's the melted army guy from the garage sale episode. There's there's references. I would hazard a guess to say that there might be references to every single episode. I know that's like a bold thing, and I haven't sat here and counted all the references, but like there are so many of them. All the characters that show up to the premiere at the end, they're all like one-off characters. Things like Spunky's love of mops, the little slime ball from I want to say it's the first episode that Spunky like chews on. That's in the thing. Obviously, the Fatheads,
and of course,
really
big man plays a part in this.
Of course, he does. Yeah, there's tons of references to the show. And it's not even just the show too. There's a lot of other Easter egg type stuff too. Like, of course, the fat heads are the VHS tape is orange because if you know anything about Nick VHS tapes, they were always orange, right? Yeah. There was worry when this first came out that like, well, since it's been finished for like a year, who knows when the writing was finished, right?
Yeah.
Like the writing was probably done in 2016, 2015 maybe. Like who knows, right? So there was a little worry that if this was going to be about modern life, there could have been references to things that were like outdated by the time it even first aired.
Yeah.
But fortunately, the way they parody modern life is in a nice general sense. They joke about things like, well, the new iPhone's out before you've even gotten your hands on the one before it. And there's Starbucks everywhere. And
hoverboards, drones, virtual reality.
Yes. These are all technologies that are still emerging and still developing and still just modern. Things that you associate with the 2010s. Yeah. Not things that you associate with like 2016 specifically.
Right.
There's no like, what are those reference or something. Like
there's no Vine stars.
Right. That was a huge relief. I'm not going to say I like laughed at all these gags. I mean, I guess in part because I saw this trailer like 2 years ago, but they were all amusing. And I think my favorite of those kind of gags is the comic book shop because Rocko worked at a comic book shop, which is like the idea that he could earn a living to own a house working at a comic book shop is it's not a very modern notion, let's say.
Yeah. I like Schlammo because it's like, I don't know, it's just energy drinks. And I guess the show takes it to the extreme by making them radioactive.
What I was going to say was just that, like, instead of making a joke about how no one reads comics anymore, or all comics are movies, or even like digital comics, the joke is that comics are now 3D printed, which is just an absurd, using a 3D printer to print out pages. like there's just a lot of layers to that one.
Literally.
So like that's the thing. It's like such a good feel watching this because you're blasted with all these references to the show. You're blasted with like, even if you didn't watch Rocko, it is still a style of animation that you just don't see too often.
No. So refreshing.
The doors being all slanted and the characters being very like moldable and off-modelable.
Yeah.
Yeah. The sound effects
the
and all that, like, yeah, very much a nice throwback. And then you're hit with all these like jokes that they may not be like hilarious, but they're just like, oh yeah, that's modern life. Like it's just such a good feel. It puts you in such a good mood when you start watching this, you know?
Yeah.
And this is when I say like I prefer them to do TV movie reunions. This is why, because they can do all the references they want. They can cram everything that he's got, you know, in, okay, you get one last shot to make a Rocko episode. Joe Murray and the creatives can put everything into it instead of feeling like, you know, you got to stretch it out over a season and you're going to get renewed and you can't just bank on nostalgia for a whole series. Like you can do that more in a TV special.
Well, yeah, like they tie in the whole like Rocko wanting to reboot it thing into Conglamo because Conglamo simultaneously while Rocko, Filbert, and Heifer return to Earth, there's an incident that happens that makes Conglamo go bankrupt. So they're kind of banking on this to make it profitable again.
Which is funny because Conglamo in I Have No Son, they all like jumped out the window at the idea of someone working in animation. But apparently now Conglamo just has like an animation department. Or,
yeah.
You know, they have like a media department, which I guess Conglamo owns everything, so that's not surprising. But it's just kind of a weird connection because Conglamo was not the owner of the show in the old
they
episodes.
They are now.
I never liked the booger picking boss. I never liked that joke.
Oh,
that
Mr. Dupet.
Nose. I just find it gross. I just always have. That always bothered me that I don't know, they make a sound effect and it's just...
Yeah, like I always like I noticed it, but it never was such an issue to me that it made me like think about it more and like, you know.
He's got a big-ish role in this.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of like booger jokes where his booger jar falls on Ed and, you know, at the end he's flicking his boogers at the wall and it's just it's just my personal preference. Like you know what? It was in the original show. Like I'm glad they didn't change it, I guess.
I don't mind gross out humor.
I don't usually, but I don't know. I just that's one that never landed for me. Really, really Big Man's nipples is
they're popping.
It's That's yeah, I mean, that's a thing from the original show. If you don't know, there's this very muscular man that ran around and shoved his nipples in your eyes, and you got to see visions. Who thought of that? Whose idea? Like, how did someone come up with this? I love how weird Rocko is.
A lot of Rocko, I feel like, was just people in the writers' room saying like daring each other to like push the boundaries of what could and couldn't be on kids' TV.
So this was developed for Nickelodeon, obviously. Like this, as we've just been through, this was not developed for Netflix in mind. So it's not like Joe Murray went in like, oh yeah, I'm gonna write this joke because Netflix can skew older or whatever. I'm happy to say that like it keeps the exact same level of innuendo as the original show.
Yeah, it's tame, but it's still suggestive.
Right. That is to say, there's references to Bev having work done, and now they're firmer.
They restore the name of the chicken restaurant.
The Choky Chicken, yes. Chewy Chicken, get out of here. There's also, when Filbert and Heifer head swap, Filbert says something about, like, don't forget to spawn, which, if you know what spawning is, that's, yeah. But yeah, no, there's tons of stuff that's, yeah, it's suggestive. I guess that's the right word. It's innuendo. It's if you know what it is, you know what it is, and if you don't, it just kind of goes by.
Yeah.
I also like the weird observational humor about like ice pops, like ice cream bars that are supposed to resemble cartoon characters that don't when they melt. That's not like a comment on 2010s. That's just like always been a thing.
Yeah.
It was cute, like, because that is like a very relatable thing where like you order the picture of SpongeBob or whatever.
I'm gonna get Donatello, and it's just like it's a green blob.
Yup. Look, Ed, this looks like you first thing in the morning. I resemble that comment. Did you know the same person voices both Ed and Bev?
Yeah, isn't it Charlie Adler?
I believe it is, actually.
He did the voice of Cow and Red Guy, I think.
Right. Also, did you catch the cameo of Mr. Lawrence in live action?
Yeah, the picture of him in the background.
Yeah, the fatheads. There's just a live action picture of Mr. Lawrence making a face, probably from 20 years ago. He looked younger there.
Yeah.
Mr. Lawrence, of course, voices Filbert. He's also a writer on this and the original show. Also Plankton, writer on SpongeBob.
Edward on Camp Lazlo.
For all the references in this thing, did you feel bothered by it as someone who does not have the show like fresh in their mind?
Not at all. It wasn't distracting. Like they were extremely subtle. So like they were put in places that like you could notice them and you could point them out easily, but they weren't so distracting that it kind of draws focus away from the main thing that's going on.
Absolutely.
Speaking of which, there was Camp Lazlo references.
All right, get him out of the way.
So there's like a scene where Rocko goes around the world looking for the creator of the Fatheads. So one of them is in India, where there's a spider monkey bathing a pink elephant.
Yep.
That's obviously in reference to Laszlo and Raj.
Sure.
And then there's another scene. I don't know if it's an exact reference. I'm pretty sure it is, but I could be wrong. There's another part in that same montage where he comes across people that are water skiing, and the background looks like the Leaky Lakes, so I'm assuming that also might be a reference to Camp Lazlo. The other one is there's a sequence where Ed is driving home in his car, and he's singing a song, and there's a little bird that pops up into his car, and it resembles Edward.
Oh, I'm surprised there's one more. Did you not catch it all?
No, I'm sure that there's some that I didn't catch.
When Conglommo is about to be shut down, there's an announcement on a loudspeaker, and it says "attention," and the loudspeaker, mouths attention.
Yeah, that is a clever reference.
The word "attention" and the loudspeaker,
attention,
talking.
Campers.
Yeah. Attention, Conglommo. Attention, Conglommo. You're all out of jobs.
It's just every frame. Well, I don't want to say every frame, but there's just most of the frames in this special are filled with so much detail and so many little things that make me appreciate it so much more. Like even in where they do like the news reports on the side, they have they have a stock symbol that's just Joe. For Joe Murray, I'm assuming. There's
a ticker tape with jokes. One of them being like, "Why does the sign say reboot even though it's a TV special?" Says pedantic nerd on the internet. Is like something like that.
The chameleons, they're super funny because I guess that's another commentary on the state of animation today, where Make art as easy with computer.
Well, so that's a joke that was written long before Camp Coral, but you know, a lot of like the whole thing about the creator like doing it better, and you got to have the creator and you can't just bring people in and do it in CG, feels a little Camp Coral-y.
Also, all those mindless and soulless people just tapping away at their computers.
We should talk about a thing that a lot of people have talked about, and some people are, you know, I don't want to give the impression we're avoiding this, but so during the special, particularly towards the middle, it's revealed that the Bighead's child has transitioned into being Rachel from Ralph.
Yeah.
Of course, this was spoiled like 2 days before this thing came out, which really, it really sucks because I get it. All of these news sources want to hop on it because it's an interesting story and it's progressive and it, you know, it'll get clicks, it'll get people, and it, you know, it will get people interested in the special, which I like. I just kind of wish that they maybe could have waited like a day after the special happened and then promoted it all, because it would have been an interesting surprise. I mean, it still is an interesting surprise because they frame it like a surprise. You know, they obscure Rachel's body before she steps out.
Right.
You know, it would have been interesting and kind of like especially surprising considering, again, Nickelodeon hasn't been the most friendly to these sort of things. So, but even though it was spoiled, I didn't actively look at the articles. I just, of course, the image was like all over everywhere. But
yeah,
I think it was done really well.
It was very tasteful.
Right. Of course, neither of us are members of the LGBT community, and you know, our opinion doesn't matter comparatively. But I think that if nothing else, like I think that it was clearly a lot of respect was shown to the issue. You could probably sit there and nitpick like little things about it, and could have been done this, it could have been done that. But I think for the amount of time that it needed to take up in the episode, and for it being a cartoon that needs to maintain some level of simplicity, I think that they handled it with a lot of grace.
In some people's perspectives, because this show is tackling a lot of the important aspects of the 2010s, it would feel wrong to leave out something like this.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. And of course, the whole theme of the thing is change, and that's a change. That's a change both culturally that more people are accepting of this, but you know, it's also just a literal change that Rachel made. So it all fits in perfectly. Like I don't feel like it was shoehorned in any way. It feels very natural, and it feels natural for the character because during both episodes in which Rachel appeared, they weren't particularly happy. Like, yeah, okay, she reconciled with her father, but you know, in the rest of it, she didn't seem very happy being an animator, and
she was a lot more aggressive and egotistic, understandably, in the 90s episode.
Mm-hmm. And in Wacky Deli, mind you, that's about how she doesn't want to continue the show and hires Rocko, Filbert, and Heifer to make a really bad version of the show to tank it in ratings so she doesn't have to make it anymore. So, like, you know, it's not like they took, like, some random character and were like, bam, you're trans now. It's like, no, they took a character who was clearly struggling with unhappiness and some sort of identity issue. Looking at I Have No Son, it is an identity issue. It's an identity of issue of, am I the business person my father wants me to be, or am I the artist that I want to be?
Yeah, and again, the character is a voice for, I guess, some of the people working on the show or the industry as a whole.
Mm-hmm. So yeah, so I felt like it fit in completely naturally. I don't think it took up too much time in the episode. I don't think it felt like it was preaching or what. Like it was just a nice, tasteful, modern way to handle it, I feel.
Yeah, and the way that Rocko, Filbert, and Heifer react to it is pretty cool too. Where she just kind of unveils the transition, and they're just like, "Cool, that's awesome."
Yeah, I mean, you know, and again, it's like you can nitpick and be like, "Oh, why?" You know, in 20 years, like they, you know, and Rocko's supposed to represent the old ways. Like, why is he so upset? But it's like, no, like there's no time for that. Like, there's no, and you don't want to send the wrong message. And it's the other thing is that not only do they have a trans character in this, but they actively have another character that's like opposing it.
Yeah, and of all characters, of course, it's Ed, who's had a lot of issues with his child in the past.
Right, and that's another thing that's crazy about it is that it's not, you know, some people, And I have not seen a lot of people complaining about this. There have been people, certainly.
I think it's been a vocal minority.
Right. I think it's been people that don't have a platform, just random people on Twitter that are angry for whatever stupid reason.
And I mean, there are certainly times where things can seem pandering to certain crowds, but I don't think that in this instance it was that at all.
No. This felt motivated by the story.
Yeah.
I mean, that's why we're doing the recast on what we're doing, is because Ed has the same conflict now with Rachel. I have no daughter. It's very, very interesting parallel and a very natural place to take the character. And it, like, in a way, Ed is the real life part of this story, because both Ed and Rocko are dealing with change. Now, Rocko is dealing with the fact that he was just like out for 20 years and now has all this stuff shoved in his face. But Ed is dealing with the much more like realistic to our lives, or to real people's lives, about like, well, he got his job, his company went under, and he's out of a job. He's gonna lose his house. And then on top of that, his child, whom he has a very fixed view of, is now saying that there's something else, and that's another change he has to accept. And that's all very down to earth and real. And I think it was very cool that they decided to have Ed be kind of like the more real side of it.
Yeah.
Because like the thing about the original, the show, is that Rocko faced a lot of modern problems. And you could get the wrong kind of message from Rocko's modern life. You could come away with the message of, well, all technology or all modern things are just bad ideas and they're going to hurt you, and just stick to the old ways. I do not think that's what Joe Murray ever intended, and I don't think that's what the original show preaches. But I could see how, just the way they do the episodes and the way they structure things, Rocko could be seen as like this symbol of going back to the old ways or something. And so I feel like, in a way, maybe the message of this special was kind of a way to show like, no, that's not what this show is about. And that's never been what this show is about. It's about exaggerating mundane things to show like, yes, you know what, when dealing with like remodeling your home, like, it is ridiculous, all of these crazy remodeling shows that tell you to put 86 bathrooms in, like, you know what I mean? Like, or it is ridiculous to say that you're going to buy a juicer and use it for everything. Like,
big cat in a tiny house.
right. Or that, like, getting your laundry done can be really tedious and annoying. Like, that's not saying like, don't do your laundry. It's just like, laundry day is a very dangerous day.
Yeah.
I think that's why the message is there. Now, how do you feel about the cloud? And I don't mean, Google Cloud. They missed out on that joke.
There's a name for it.
Winds of Change.
Winds of Change, right. Because of the way that the character's introduced, and because of the special is already so meta as is, so of course it would make sense for them to have a meta character kind of come in as a voice of reason, who's named a form of the voice of reason.
Right.
But, I mean, ultimately, it's not the Winds of Change that's the one that convinces Rocko what's right and wrong. It's Ed, and I think that was well done.
Mm-hmm.
And the way he accepted, he's just like, okay, change is okay.
Yeah, well, because that's the thing. That's the thing about Rocko, is that, he's not... Ed is the more realistic old person who's stuck in their ways and just doesn't want to accept change. Rocko is just a little bit more of like a neurotic mess that struggles.
He's naive.
He struggles with things. Yeah, like it's not that he doesn't want to accept, like it's like it just doesn't come naturally to him. It's not that he's unwilling to accept change. It's just that he has problems, and then he decided, this was so much change at once that he cloisters up in the special. So that's interesting. Yeah, I mean, I saw some people arguing that the Winds of Change was on the nose, and I mean, it is.
That's the point.
Right, like, I don't think anyone would say it's not. I think I would say that it doesn't matter. You could call the special preachy, but it's not really preaching for anything in particular. It's more just like, you know what, change is okay. There's no lecture on trans acceptance in the episode. Like,
no, it's like, obviously there's some lessons that you can take from it, but at heart it's like it's silly. Like, directly after they have this emotional moment, Conglamo gets wrecked and money falls from the sky and everyone's trying to steal it.
Right. And I mean, like, it is also 100% in line with Rocko to have the Winds of Change. I mean, they reference it. They have a house fall on him, but there's a literal compost guy who sings about recycling. Like, you know what I mean? Like, that's the kind of show that it was. It's like,
it knows what it is.
this special was everything that I could have hoped for. Is it like the best TV movie I've ever seen? No, I don't think so. Like, I don't think that it was like this mind-blowing experience, but it was so faithful to the original show while still being modern, you know? And that's such a strange...
It embraces the themes that it tries to teach.
Right, like, but think about how complicated it is to make a show that's styled like the 90s, but the whole point of it is that it takes place in modern, like, I don't know, it's like such a weird thing to wrap your head around. So it feels like so easy to mess that up, like to make the show too modern or whatever. Like, but no, like the art style, I mean, we kind of talked about it, but it's all 100% consistent. Like, obviously now they're using digital coloring, and like,
it's widescreen,
and the line work is definitely like a lot better than it was because of digital scanning, I suppose. That's probably the reason. Aside from like technological upgrades, it doesn't look like there's anything different about it stylistically. And I would argue that even like Rocko's color, like his tone is a little different, but I would argue that's probably the original tone that they meant to have for Rocko, but maybe it's just kind of like faded because of, you know, that happens.
That happened with cell animation, yeah. And it's cool too when they show like the old VHS tape of the Fatheads. They kind of emulate like the 90s cell style with the kind of the shadow and that sort of thing.
Yeah. But yeah, it was so faithful in that way. It made me smile so many times at the references and at just like the goofy modern jokes, and then yeah, it hits you with just this really nice. It look like arc wise, it is a retread of I Have No Son. It has a problem with his child's decisions. They argue, and like it kind of goes beat for beat in that they clash and then they make up. That's what happens in both of them. Like, right?
Yeah.
But I feel like, you know, there was so much else going on in Static Cling. I wouldn't say that it's like awful that they kind of used that core, because I mean, clearly they felt like it was something that worked in the show.
Yeah.
So they put it in. I mean, you could say it's a reference just like anything else.
Joe Murray's style of humor just strikes a chord with me so much, and I think that's maybe some of the reason why I love Camp Lazlo so much. Just little stupid things that aren't even like, they're not even like set up punchline, just where it's like paramedics going up, 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 up.
Oh, I'm so glad they included those guys.
Like Filbert saying, "Let's frolic innocently in nature," or just like just little throwaway lines too, like when they're in Conglommo and Ed's talking about change, and then Heifer goes, "Change? Can anybody break a 5?" And he's right next to a vending machine that just happens to be right there. Like, that's just these little things make me laugh so much, and I love those little quirks.
Yeah. Do you remember what Filbert's username was?
Yeah, it was Fishsticks96, right?
Yep. Which is another
96 because that was the last year that Rocko aired, and then Fishsticks because that's like his catchphrase.
I mean, I was thinking 96 because it's kind of like a different number.
Oh, that too.
Like a new master number.
Yeah.
But
I wrote down a list of complete comparisons. Like you mentioned, falling out of buildings, the beaver nickname, the fact that at the end Rocko doesn't like the new episode of the Fatheads.
Yep.
The chameleons working with the animation, Rocko knocking on the Bighead's door and Ed being really disappointed.
Not only is Rocko dissatisfied with the new Fatheads, but it's also explicitly because of a new character.
Yeah. And then also pretty much the main part of it where it's just between Ed and his child, where at the end Ed references something from their past and it makes them reconcile. And in the I Have No Son episode, it was the donut. And in this one, it's the retina thing.
Right. Yep.
You damaged my retina, and that's really what causes Ed to change and accept Rachel.
It's heartwarming, man.
Yeah.
Retinas.
Isn't it funny how they make something so poignant over something so stupid? Like, that's just why I love this show.
Right. Well, maybe that's why Ed has trouble accepting change, because he can't always see too well because of his retina. Rocko is something special, but I will tell you, I am 100% satisfied with never seeing another Rocko thing ever again.
I agree.
The 4 seasons of the show and the 1 reunion special, it's like, it completes it. Like, would I be angry if they were like, oh, we're going to do another reunion special, like, 5 years from now or 10 years from now? No, I wouldn't. I'd be okay with it. But, like, I don't know, it feels so complete, and it's not even like it ends on like the most perfect note or anything, but it is just really like this was the perfect window back into that show. And I do firmly believe, like, if you told Joe Murray and you got, like, I don't know, Mr. Lawrence and Martin Olson and like other people that worked on the show back together and told them to make like, here, make 3 seasons of this show, make 13 episodes a season, it wouldn't be the same show. I think it's a much easier to do that for a TV special.
Yeah, well, in that instance too, they'd like, if they had like 30 episodes to make, they'd have to like devote certain episodes to certain issues, like
Right.
like I don't know, like vegans or like some other thing like that. Whereas like they reference that stuff here, but it's not so important that it kind of diverts the attention away. And it's just these little things where it clicks with you. You're like, I recognize that. It's there, but it's not the focus.
Right. I have a viewer comment from Norbert who says, if you notice during Static Cling, there's actually 3 or 4 parts where there's like a second of static. I think those were the commercial breaks were supposed to be. But after they sold it to Netflix, they added those in place of commercial breaks because Netflix doesn't have commercials. That makes sense to me. Those seemed like story beats.
Yeah, and I guess on that thread, is there like an explicit reason why you think it was called Static Cling?
Because Rocko is clinging to the past. Another word for
TV?
Well,
I think that's it.
No. Yes, on some level, static is literal static. However, what do you call it when something is unmoving and unchanging?
Static. Yeah.
There you go. So Rocco's clinging to the past.
Because a lot of people were confused. Like, what does it have to do with static cling? Like, there's no.
It's a pun. I mean, it doesn't. Yeah. It doesn't have anything to do with actual like... static cling.
There's no electricity in clothes.
Oh my goodness. No, I like the title. I think it's clever, and I think it felt like it didn't tell us much, but now it makes perfect, complete sense.
Yeah.
I was a little disappointed we didn't get that much of Dr. Hutchinson. It would have also maybe been nice to get a little more individualistic things on Filbert and Heifer instead of them kind of both just being really, really into
brainwashed everything. by iPhones and vlogging.
Right. Like, I mean, this was very much a Rocko and Ed story. Like, it was not, they were just there. Especially like neurotic Filbert. I'm kind of surprised he took the things so well. I feel like he'd go crazy on Twitter.
He had his 5 loyal subscribers.
Yeah. I mean, look, I could sit here and be like, oh, I wish we could have seen more of this or more of that, but that's the nature of these specials. You know, it's like they picked and chose, and I'm glad. You know, we still got a cameo by her, and they fit everything in. Just maybe not
Heifer's grandpa.
yeah. That guy's a classic.
Yeah,
Napoleon.
Yeah, Bones, Napoleon Bonaparte,
the foot guy.
Yeah, the foot guy that was next to the lady who got electrocuted.
Yeah, the ghost from the Halloween episode and the elves from the Christmas episode.
Yep.
Which one did you prefer, Monsters?
I prefer Static Cling. Simple as that. Some of my reason isn't exactly, I don't want to say objective, but just like, I really commend Joe Murray and the team that put this together because, like, granted, they probably had more money and more time to prepare for this as opposed to an ordinary episode. But the fact that after 2 decades, they were able to put together such a compelling story that had fan service, but also a really, really interesting and complex narrative with emotional resonance and just stupid oddball comedy that really strikes a chord with me. It was perfect, and
yeah.
You know, I made a tweet about it. Like, this is everything I hoped for and more, and I think it was well worth the wait. It really struck a chord with me, and with that's why I prefer Static Cling.
Yeah, I think I do have to agree on that. I mean, obviously, it's not a super fair comparison, and I think I Have No Son certainly paved the way for Static Cling.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Even though it kind of copies the story beats, because there's that new layer, you know, of Rachel being trans, and of course there's all the other things going on with like it being a reunion special, all the cameos, all the references, all the this and that. It kind of feels like a supersized version of I Have No Son. You know, like they did take that plot and then just flopped it into this much bigger, grandiose thing.
Yeah. Well, they take everything great about the show and they put it into a really nice package.
It is 100% a triumph in making something that is faithful to the original. I applaud it, and it did a really great job. It is quintessential Rocko's Modern Life. It doesn't always seem like it's so hard, but trust, like, it is so hard. Like, to not end up with something like the Powerpuff Girls reboot.
Yeah, it feels like it came straight from the show.
Yeah, it feels like they made this episode, they wrote this episode or something, and then just like left that script untouched and those boards untouched, and they just put it through
animation
modern
itself
technology.
has changed so much. Like, I mean, Rocko was individual in its own right, but still, in the 90s, there were a lot of shows that had similar art and similar ideas that they explored. But it felt so weird watching this Rocko special on Netflix. Like, I felt like it was some sort of lost media. I mean, for some years, I guess it maybe was, but like,
I mean, it feels like an alternate reality where Joe Murray said, yeah, I'm going to keep making Rocko, and then Rocko became the big hit show instead of SpongeBob, and this is just what Rocko's Modern Life looks like now. Because, I mean, like, it doesn't really look that far off from what SpongeBob currently looks like in some ways, you know?
Yeah, it's a bit more sketchy.
Right. Yeah, it's definitely Joe Murray's style, and that is signature. But, you know, some of the faces Ed made, I was like, that looks like something that could be a Squidward face. Like, all right, that was that. Next week on the recast, you know, both Rocko and Invader Zim came out like in short order of each other. And so we thought, why not, right after doing Static Cling, cover the Hey Arnold Jungle movie?
Weren't expecting that, huh?
Yeah. Next week we are going to be discussing The Journal, which is the final episode of Hey Arnold, the final TV movie of Hey Arnold, and comparing it to The Jungle movie, which is the real final TV movie of Hey Arnold, I guess. Yeah, it'll be our first times watching it since it came out a few years ago, so who knows? I did do a video, but maybe my opinions changed. I didn't watch The Journal before watching The Jungle movie.
Neither did I.
Right.
Yeah.
And I felt like I did miss out on context, and I felt like it was my own stupid fault. But maybe that context will help improve my opinion on it, because it wasn't super high. And do not worry, Invader Zim fans. We are going to watch Invader Zim, and we're going to watch the movie. And if there is a good comparison to be made with an episode, we will do a recast episode on it in the not so distant future. And if there is not a good episode to compare it to, we might just make that the rotating segment for next week. So either way, you will hear us enter the Florpus.
Yes.
All right. So now we have trivia.
Yes, we do. If you might remember from episode 4 of the recast, you quizzed me on episode synopses that were either from Rocko or Laszlo, and you kind of mixed up characters, and we're going to kind of bring that back today and have fun.
All right.
So I'm going to read off prompts, and these will be interchangeable from Rocko or Laszlo episode descriptions, and sometimes the names might be interchanged, sometimes they might just be episode descriptions, and it's your job to guess whether or not it's a Rocko episode or a Laszlo episode.
Okay. Sounds fun.
Prompt number 1. Prickly Pines is about to be bulldozed, so the Jelly Scouts and Slinkmen go on a road trip to see it before its demolition.
That's definitely Camp Laszlo.
Is that your final answer?
Yes.
Well, that's wrong.
What?
It's an episode of Rocko called Road Rash. And the correct synopsis is Flem Rock is about to be bulldozed, so Rocko and Heifer go on a road trip to see it before its demolition.
That's the one with the infamous motel scene that got banned.
Yep.
Okay.
All right. So you're 0 for 1. You got 4 more opportunities to score.
Dang, you got me. All right.
All right, prompt number 2. Nina is convinced by a Ouija board that both Chip and Skip are her soulmates.
That one is for real Camp Laszlo this time.
That is correct.
Okay.
That is a Camp Laszlo episode called Space Mates.
Whew. All right. That sounds like a real barnstormer.
Stop.
Sounds like a real stinker.
I mean,
Get
Chip
it?
and Skip are.
Get it?
Yeah. All right, so you're 1 for 2.
All
Let's
right.
move on to prompt number 3. Rocko becomes an outlaw after a scuffle with Mr. Dupet.
Okay. All right. So that feels I feel like there's a Camp Laszlo episode where it's like Laszlo's wearing like a poncho, and I don't really know why, but Rocko Rocko would become an outlaw after the Conglamo guy? I'm going to say Camp Lazlo again. That's all I'm going to say, apparently.
That's correct.
Yeah!
The episode of Camp Lazlo is called Clam the Outlaw, and it's where Clam becomes an outlaw after a scuffle with Scoutmaster Lupus. All right, so you're 2 for 3. All right, prompt number 4. Filbert takes Rocko on a bird wig snatching hunt.
That one is definitely Rocko. I remember that episode.
That's correct. It's a Rocko's episode called Rugbirds. The reason why I threw that in there is because it often gets confused with an episode of Lazlo called The Wig of Y, which is where the Scoutmaster of Acorn Flats, the Squirrel Scouts, she leaves her wig off around, and Lazlo finds it, and he becomes like a psychic.
Oh, I remember that one too. But yeah, the Rocko episode, they're trying to steal it off it's like a balding eagle, I think is what they call it, right?
Mm.
Where it's balding, so it wears a wig.
Yeah, so that's
right.
Funny.
Yeah.
All right, so you're 3 for 4. Let's move on to the last prompt. Heifer loses a drinking contest to Filbert, infuriating him. He tries to stop Filbert from using the bathroom as revenge.
This feels like a Camp Lazlo episode, only because, I don't know, I feel like... I don't think this is the marshmallow episode. Unless you're, mixing up nouns, too, which would be really bad. But I don't know, it just kind of feels like a Camp Lazlo thing where, Lazlo beats Raj, and Raj, I don't know, I seem to recall an episode where, Lazlo or someone can't go to the bathroom. All right, I'm going to say Camp Lazlo.
All right, well, you're correct. It's an episode called Hold It, Lazlo. Great name, of course.
Yeah, great.
And it's where
too.
Edward loses a drinking contest to Lazlo, which makes Edward very upset. And then, as revenge, Edward basically tries to prevent Lazlo from using the bathroom.
Right. I feel like that would be easier to do at a camp where it's like a latrine that you could just lock versus
I mean, he can just go outside. Look,
like an animal. What are you? Come on.
All right. Well, you went 4 for 5. You did very well.
Thank you. All right. Well, that has been another episode of the new and improved Recast. Let us know what you think about the changes we've made and more over on our Discord server. Monsters, thank you for being here.
Thanks for being here, too. Change is good.
What a better subject for a podcast where we change things than to have a show with a message that says change is okay. And I mean, look, change is okay. Not every change is a positive change. Certainly not. But just in general, you have to be okay with the concept that things are going to change.
No, yeah. You can't have any sort of progression in life if everything just stays the same.
Absolutely. All right. PIEGUYRULZ out.
Catch you guys next time.